Hello, I'm Dr. Aizaz from medicovisual.com, and in this visual lecture we will talk about the neural tube, and we will talk about the different subdivisions of the neural tubes, and basically we will be talking about the brain swellings, the primary and secondary brain vesicles or brain swellings. And by the way, these are normal swellings that form during the embryogenic process of nervous system. And we will also talk about the flexures that form during the embryogenesis of central nervous system. So let's start the discussion today. So here we have the neural tube, and we have discussed previously in the lecture of neurulation that a neural tube is formed, and we have discussed the details that how exactly it forms. We have discussed all those details earlier. Now what happens that it has this dilated end and it has this relatively narrow end. So this dilated end, this is basically the primordial brain. This is going to form the brain, and this relatively narrow end that starts from here and up to here in this 3D model, this one, this is the primordial spinal cord. It is going to form the spinal cord. Dilated end, this one, this globular dilated end, it is going to form brain, and this one is going to form spinal cord. And of course there are neural crest cells as well that will form the components of peripheral nervous system and some other structures. And this neural tube as well, it will also contribute to the peripheral nervous system that we will see later. Now what happens that this dilated end, this cranial dilated end, it will subdivide into some swellings basically, and let's see how. So here you can see it has been subdivided into three basic swellings, and these earlier swellings are earlier vesicles of the primordial brain. These earlier vesicles of the primordial brains that form earlier, these are the primary brain vesicles. Later on we will see that there are certain other vesicles also that form basically by the subdivision of these earlier vesicles, that are secondary brain vesicles. So these are the primary brain vesicles, and basically they are three in number. So let's see what are they. If I start labeling them, this one, the cranial most, is the prosencephalon. Basically pros is the prefix, and then we write it prosencephalon. It's a fancy name. Encephalon is another fancy name for the brain. I think it's Latin or Greek, I don't exactly remember, but anyhow, encephalon means brain, and pros is the prefix, and pros, I think it means the earlier one, yeah, if I remember correctly. So then there is the third one, the caudal most is rhombencephalon. It is named as rhomb because it forms a rhombus or diamond shaped swelling, not swelling, I mean diamond shaped. The fourth ventricle is formed by this Rhombencephalon. And then we have the middle one in between these two is the mes is middle, mesencephalon. It is pronounced as mesencephalon, so just for the sake of ease of explanation, I am saying it like mesencephalon. So these are three basic or primary brain swelling: prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombencephalon. And finally, of course, this is the spinal cord. Not much major changes occur in the spinal cord, primordial spinal cord, at this phase. Then you know that there is the craniocaudal folding. One reason is this. The other reason is that these primary brain swellings and this primordial brain, it has to grow and it has to develop within a limited space inside this developing skull. So it will somehow fold, right? So it will fold like this. This is the cranial folding, and of course there is the caudal folding as well here. at the site of spinal cord, at the caudal end of spinal cord. So this is the craniocaudal folding like this. So craniocaudal folding like this. Let's watch it again. So here you can see it has folded in a particular fashion as a result of craniocaudal folding. Now as the craniocaudal folding has occurred, mainly you can see that the flexion or you can say rotation. Here there will be that rotation. This rotation is mainly at two places. If I draw a line like this, so here there will be folding and then it is going straight, and then again here there will be folding, or you can say flexion here, and then of course there is some degree of curvature or flexion here as well, but it is not much significant clinically, and during the development it does not has any significant role, so we just ignore it. So mainly we focus here this flexion, this bend or flexion here, and this bend or flexion. These two bends are here, and mainly they are on these curvature are on the internal surface, basically I mean the ventral surface. So here these two curvatures are there. So these two curvatures or these two bends or these two flexures are given particular name. This one is the cervical flexure. Cervical flexure. Why cervical? Because it is in the cervical region. It's very logical. And the other one, this one is the cephalic flexure. Cephalic flexure because it's in the head region, cephalic region. Secondly, it is also named as mesencephalic or midbrain flexure. Because, by the way, I forgot to tell you earlier that midbrain flexure. Okay, let me tell you here. So again, this is prosencephalon, this is mesencephalon, and this is rhombencephalon. Now the prosencephalon, it is also called forebrain. Mesencephalon is also called midbrain. This I forgot to tell you earlier. And this rhombencephalon is also called hindbrain. Now the cervical flexure is between the primordial hindbrain, or basically rhombencephalon. It is between the rhombencephalon and the primordial spinal cord. So this is the cervical flexure, and the other one, the cephalic flexure or cephalic flexure, it is not between the two structure. Remember, it is within the midbrain swelling. It is within the midbrain vesicle or vesicle, however you like to call it. So it is within the midbrain vesicle at its ventral surface. By the way, here there will be the the developing pharynx, and then there will be GIT, and all these structure will be here. So that's why this is the ventral surface and this is the dorsal surface, right? So these two, cervical, cephalic and cervical flexure, these two flexures, they are along the ventral surface of this developing neural tube. Then there is another flexure as well, and before that, let me tell you that these three primary vesicles, they are later converted into secondary brain vesicles. So basically the prosencephalon will be divided into two, and hindbrain, the rhombencephalon, it will also be divided into two parts. But mesencephalon, it is so stubborn, it remains as such, it is not divided. So it remains as a single swelling. So what about the prosencephalon? As I've told you, it divides into two like this. It divides into two. So the one that is at the end, this is the telencephalon. Again, it is a subdivision of prosencephalon. This is the telencephalon. This is the Diencephalon, and of course it remains meson. And then here this Rhombencephalon will also be divided into two. Let me tell you how it happens. So basically there is another bend that occurs. There is unequal growth of the Rhombencephalon, and then another bending occurs like this. So here the bending occurs, and this bending, this is again, as I've told you, this side here there will be the back of embryo, here there will be the back side of the embryo, right? So this is the dorsal side, this one is the dorsal side. So this flexure is on the dorsal end. Another flexure has been formed here. This is on the dorsal end, and this flexure is basically called Pontine flexure because pons will form here. Here there will be the formation of pons. So this is the Pontine flexure. Basically, it's in the Rhombencephalon region. I think it should be called Rhombencephalic flexure, but I have never heard someone calling it Rhombencephalic flexure. It is mainly called as Pontine flexure, right? Now, the development of this Pontine flexure is not that simple. It's a little more complicated, and we will discuss it in bit more detail when we will talk about the development of Rhombencephalon and pons and medulla and cerebellum and related structure. Then we will talk about it in a bit more detail. There is a roof plate as well here, and there will be the formation of fourth ventricle. We will discuss all these details later, but I just want to tell you here that it is not that simple. Before someone comes and write in the comment that Dr. Aizaz, you are teaching wrong concept, this is wrong visualization. I know it's wrong. It's technically wrong. It's oversimplified. But at this time, the oversimplification is a necessary evil. So bear with me. I will explain these things later as well. Don't worry about it. So anyhow, with the formation of this Pontine flexure at the dorsal end, this Rhombencephalon has now been divided into two parts. So this cranial part is the, what it is called? It is called Metencephalon. Metencephalon basically, not Metencephalon, Metencephalon. And this one is, this other part is called Myelencephalon, right? And of course this is Mesencephalon, this is Diencephalon, and this is Prosencephalon, and of course this is the spinal cord. Now here let me tell you another important thing, that here there is a bit of constriction here, especially apparent at the dorsal surface. There is this constriction between the Mesencephalon and Rhombencephalon, which basically differentiate the Mesencephalon and Rhombencephalon here. This constriction is basically called isthmus rhombencephali. Isthmus rhombencephali or rhombencephalic isthmus, that's what we call it. So here there is that constriction, especially apparent at the dorsal surface. This is the isthmus rhombencephali. Now let me briefly tell you that what structures will be formed by these secondary brain swellings, and now they are termed as secondary brain vesicles. Secondary brain vesicles, right? So all these are now secondary brain vesicles. How many are these? Prosencephalon 1, Diencephalon 2, 1, 2, Mesencephalon 3, and 4 is Metencephalon, 5th is Myelencephalon. So we have 5 brain vesicles, and overall if you talk about neural tube, it is divided into 6 parts, and the 6th part is the primitive spinal cord. Now later we will see, when we will talk about the development of individual structures of the central nervous system, we will see that the cells of these neural tube, they will proliferate around the, for example, spinal cord region in this way. They will proliferate around these, and then there will be formation of different plates, alar plate, basal plate. We will discuss these details later, and it will form a complete spinal cord around this, like this. So the spinal cord will be of course formed by this structure, and the original, the lumen, this lumen containing tube, the original lumen, it will become much narrower, and this original lumen, it will become the central canal of spinal cord. Then this will form central canal of spinal cord. Then if we talk about this Myelencephalon here, it will form medulla oblongata. There will be of course the structural changes in it, and it will form medulla oblongata here, medulla. Then from this Metencephalon, from its ventral side, pons will be formed. Here there will be formation of pons from here, and from the dorsal end there will be the alar lip filarize. We will discuss the details later, and these lips will meet, they will form the cerebellar plate, and ultimately a beautiful cerebellum will be formed here, right? So cerebellum will be formed here. So Metencephalon will transform into cerebellum as well as the pons, and the cavity here between them, the cavity, this cavity that is formed, this CSF filled cavity, it is the fourth ventricle. Then talking about the mesencephalon, the cells that are forming this part of neural tube, again they will also proliferate in a specific way, and they will form midbrain here. With this mesencephalon, midbrain will be formed, and this original lumen of this tube, it will become much narrower, and it will form the central aqueduct of midbrain. Again, don't worry about it, we will discuss it one by one. And finally there is this Diencephalon. It will form mainly thalami, the thalamus, hypothalamus, these ovoid structures, thalamus, hypothalamus, right? Subthalamus, epithalamus, pineal gland, even your most of the part of your eye, I mean the retina and optic nerve and so on. We will discuss these details. That will be formed mainly thalami, you can write here. So those structures will be formed by Diencephalon, right? And between them again this cavity will remain, this lumen, its cavity will form another ventricle, and this is the which ventricle? Third ventricle. So this is third ventricle, this is central aqueduct of Sylvius or central aqueduct of midbrain. Then here there is fourth ventricle, and finally this part, Telencephalon, this is the end one, it will form what? It will form the cerebral hemispheres. Bilaterally it will form cerebral hemispheres, and this cavity, it will also divide into two, and it will form bilateral structures. All these other cavities, all these other ventricles, they are single, but these are paired, these are bilateral, these are the lateral ventricles. So lateral ventricles are basically the cavities of Telencephalon. Lateral ventricles are cavities of Telencephalon. Third ventricle, it's not ventricles, it's ventricle. Third ventricle, it is single one. It is the cavity of Diencephalon, central aqueduct of Sylvius. It is the cavity of midbrain. Then we have fourth ventricle, which is the cavity of hindbrain or Rhombencephalon, or pons and medulla and cerebellum. All these three structures, they have this a special ventricle. They have equipped with their own ventricle, that is fourth ventricle. And finally we have central canal of spinal cord. So again, if we review these structures, the Telencephalon, it forms the cerebral hemisphere and its cavity is lateral ventricles, right? Then we have third ventricle, and by the way, we have two lateral ventricles. You must be wondering, where is ventricle first and second? We have fourth ventricle, we have third ventricle. Where is first ventricle and where is second ventricle? Basically, we do not usually name these lateral ventricles and as first and second, but it is understood that right and left lateral ventricles are first and second ventricles. I don't know which one is first, whether it's right or left, because it is not defined anywhere, but it is understood that these are first and second ventricle. The third one is this, and then we have fourth ventricle, right? So you might be confused about this, so I thought I should tell this as well. So yeah, we were discussing that cerebral hemispheres, mainly they are formed by the Prosencephalon, of course Prosencephalon, I mean the Telencephalon part of Prosencephalon that forms the cerebral hemisphere. Let me write it here. Cerebral hemispheres, these are formed by Telencephalon. Then, and of course their cavity is lateral ventricle, and third ventricle is the cavity of Diencephalon, and it forms thalami. It mainly forms thalami. Of course it also forms pituitary and many other structures that we will discuss later, but you can simply write it that it mainly forms thalami. Then we have this midbrain, which is formed by midbrain vesicle or mesencephalic vesicle, and then there is its cavity called central aqueduct of Sylvius. Then we have the Metencephalon, which forms cerebellum and pons, and Myelencephalon, which forms medulla oblongata, and their cavity is fourth ventricle, the diamond shaped. Because of that, it is called Rhombencephalon. And finally, we have central canal of spinal cord, and spinal cord is formed by the cells surrounding this part of neural tube. Now it's possible that you might forget the sequence, so I have devised a bit of dirty mnemonic. If you don't like it, I'm sorry for that. Please don't get offended and don't hate me for this. I just make these mnemonics so that you can remember. So the mnemonic is that today Dixie Miss. You can write any other name, Diana ma'am or whatever. So today Dixie Miss met my spicy cock. And if you are feeling very naughty, you can replace spicy with sexy. Today Dixie Miss met my spicy cock. I'm sorry for that if you are offended, but it will help you remember. So today, T for Telencephalon. Dixie or Diane or Di or whatever name you put it here, you can remember it that this is Diencephalon. And Miss is Mesencephalon, right? Mesencephalon, right? Then Met is Metencephalon. My is Myelencephalon. And spicy or sexy and cock, spicy cock, spinal cord, right? So final one is spinal cord. And by the way, if you have sudden uncontrollable urge to mix this mnemonic, you might be thinking it like this: today Miss Dixie met my spicy cock. So you might swap these terms like this. So in that case, please remember that die means second. Die is second. Telen means end. Telen is the last one, right? And basically first one in this case. The cranial one is Telen. Telen means far away, right? You see far flung objects with a telescope and you call the people that are far from you with the help of telephone. So Telen is the end, right? So it's the end of, it's the basically the cranial end of neural tube. So Telencephalon. You can remember this, but die is second. So Diencephalon. Die by, it means second. So Diencephalon. I think you can remember that Dixie is second. I think my beloved and respectable Indian students would remember the sequence Dixie Miss or Dixie Ma'am, because that's how they usually communicate. But in some countries, they write Miss first and then they write the name Miss or Mister. So in India, they usually say it like this, Dixie Ma'am or whatever Ma'am. But in many other countries, first they write Ma'am and then Ma'am or Miss, and then they write the name or say the name. So that's how it is. So I hope with this mnemonic you can remember. And that was all about the brain flexures and brain vesicles. I hope you understood this lecture, and if you have any question, please write down the comments and give your views about this video in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a great day. Goodbye.